Today we're going to make a frittata for our eggs and dairy unit. A frittata is an egg bake, basically. You can make it on the stovetop, or you can start it on the stovetop and finish it in the oven, or you can make it in the oven. It's a crustless quiche, maybe would be another way to describe it. So we're going to work on a frittata. I have some ingredients that we're going to use in class, but the great thing about these is that you can use almost anything you have. So you have a half an onion in your fridge, you could use that. You have some maybe leftover ground beef or a little leftover bacon from some potato soup you made. You could use that. You could use some diced ham. You could use spinach, mushrooms, peppers. You could use any vegetables or kind of whatever almost leftovers that you have in the fridge, and then some eggs, which are really cheap right now. So this works out well for a good, filling, balanced meal. So let's go on with our pictures. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to use a non-stick skillet. And we're going to put our olive oil in it, and we're going to start heating that up. I have 6 eggs. I cracked them into a separate dish first and then put them pooled together here. So I've got 6 eggs. I heated up my olive oil. I swirled it around in the pan just so it covered the bottom of it and made sure that it's nice and hot before I add my sliced red potatoes. You certainly don't have to use potatoes. You could just go straight to the vegetables at this point. The potatoes bulk it up just a little bit and of course give you that carbohydrate in there too. So you can do it either way. My potatoes are going to get covered. I'm going to lift the lid and stir them every now and then, but the thing we like about the cover is we're going to also steam them. So we're not trying to cook them all the way here. We're only trying to cook them half of the way here. Okay, so I'm going to get some nice color developing on my potatoes. So I did stir it just a little bit. And then once I get this nice color on them and I'm starting to get it on both sides, then I want to arrange them across the bottom of my pan because they're mostly not going to move anymore at this point. So I've got this nice color on this side. The other side had less color. So I put the side with more color up because I know the side with less color is going to cook more now that it's on the bottom. So the more colored side up, so that nice crisp part is already done, just so that they don't burn. So after this, I'm ready to add my vegetables, or if you skip the potatoes, like I said, you could go straight to the vegetables. So I chose spinach for mine. So remember that spinach is really going to cook down. So our spinach is going to cook down. You can see it here with the garlic and the green onions. You could save some green onions for garnish if you like, and at this point, like I said earlier, you could add any vegetables you want. You could do fresh green beans, you could do anything that you think that you would like, and even if you don't traditionally have it with eggs, it still will often work in a frittata. So next, this is just less than a minute later, so that spinach that we learned about in our vegetable unit that's going to cook down a lot, this is that wilted spinach. So it's starting to smell really good at this point. I wish you could smell it. That garlic, remember we want to stir it around just a little bit to make sure that it doesn't burn, but I'm mostly leaving my potatoes in place. And then the next thing I do is I dump my egg mixture. I did whisk in about 1/3 of a cup of milk with those eggs that you saw earlier, and then I just dumped that egg mixture on top of the filling. So that's on there, and then those little pieces that were poking out, so those potatoes up there that were poking out and the spinach, I just kind of took my rubber scraper and pushed that down in there. You wouldn't have to, but I did do that. And then I put them into my oven. So I like to finish them in the oven. Sometimes when you finish cooking them on the stovetop, even with a lid, you get kind of a burnt bottom. So I just like to finish it in the oven. And for me, out of the way and I can clean up everything else, works really well. So I did 350 and I set my timer for 10 minutes. Now if you're doing this, you have to make sure that you're using an oven-safe pan. So you can tell by this handle. Some of your handles at home might be plastic coated. Those do not go in the oven, but ours do. So I put it in the oven. I started with 10. I actually wound up baking it for about 17 minutes. What I'm looking for is the center to be set. So the center is set here. And when I shook it just a little bit, so there wasn't any jiggle, and then I could tell it's not very glossy on the top. It looks done, but not dried out, so it's still a little shiny. So that works perfectly. And then a trick here is, and I will often do this to myself, this pan handle is obviously going to be hot because it was just in the oven. we're not used to our pan handles being hot because it's normally on the stovetop. So a little trick would be to keep this on there so every time you pick it up, you're not going to accidentally touch this 350-degree handle there. So leave a pot holder sitting over the top of it so nobody comes along and just grabs the pan, which I've done lots and lots of times. So don't learn this the hard way. Just put that on there, and then you can take your rubber scraper and you can push it up from the edge. So again, you'll be able to tell it's done by taking your rubber scraper and just put your rubber scraper around the edges and it'll pull away from the sides. Okay, so then I'm going to make sure that I run my rubber scraper all the way around the outside because my next step is going to be turning it out onto a plate. Now you can serve it this side up or you can serve it bottom side up, so like an upside down cake. So they're often served bottom side up. So I put a plate on top of my pan, and then I turned it out and it is done. So I can see my potatoes that way. If you don't care about that, then serve it that way. Either way will work. And then you cut it into wedges. It's great with a little bit of hot sauce. Season it, salt and pepper. You could season it earlier with your eggs as well. And again, you could use tons of different leftover things that you have. I've even seen them made with a little bit of leftover chili or stew as your meat and your vegetables, and then you don't really have to cook it even. You just toss it in there and toss your eggs on top, and then you're done. So you can make these lots of different ways. Healthy, cheap, filling, and then you guys are going to make biscuits with yours tomorrow if your group chose to. So remember to get those in the oven, and you can just cook your frittata in the oven at the same temperature as your biscuits, and that'll work just fine. So of course it's going to take a little bit less time, and then just check for it to be done. But you want your biscuits to go in the oven at about the same time as your frittata so that they're done at about the same time, because they'll have pretty similar cooking times. The biscuits could go in a little bit after and still be okay, or yes, they'll still be okay because they have a slightly shorter cooking time, but otherwise you can just toss them in at the same time. That's it. Enjoy.